course, we did invite both Nigel Farage and Nick Clegg to join us. Unfortunately, they declined. However, we do have Diane James, a member of the European Parliament for the South East and UKIP's Home Affairs spokesman, and she is here to answer your questions. Before we start the examination, though, have a watch of this. OK, let's get started. Our first question comes from Farhad. Where are you, Farhad? There you are. What do you want to ask?
Although I agree with most of UKIP's policies...
Sorry, could you speak up?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I can't hear.
Firm but fair, Diane. I like it.
Although I agree with most of UKIP's policies, its gaffes and some of its racist attitude discourages me from voting for them. Why does UKIP attract people with xenophobic and hateful views?
They don't attract xenophobic. I think that's a very, very damning comment to make. There are 44,000 people out there who are members of UKIP, and to actually make the accusation that they all suffer from xenophobia and homophobia and whatever else the unpleasant adjectives that are used, I think is a very, very unfair statement. And it's not also accurate or credible. Where we have identified individuals who have said or done things that we think are totally inappropriate, they have been dealt with. They've been expelled or they've been suspended from the party. And unlike a lot of other of the parties, we've done that as soon as we've found things out. And there have been classic cases where individuals have come from other political parties, saying the things that are now suddenly so wrong, doing the things that are now so suddenly wrong, and that caused the media, they didn't make any media notice whatsoever, but just because they're with UKIP, all of a sudden they do. So I absolutely reject the aspect or the comment that UKIP is homophobic or racist.
But I guess, just to come back to the gentleman's point, you're not saying that they're all racist and homophobic, you're just saying why does it attract some?
Yeah, why does it attract some of them? In the news every single day you hear about it. Why UKIP?
I don't think they do. But what's very interesting, since the European elections, when we did so well, the media said, and the other opposition politicians said, we are now going to subject that party to a degree of scrutiny that they've never, ever had before. And, you know, in a way, I'm grateful for that, because they've managed to expose some of the individuals that we don't want in the party. We don't need them, and they shouldn't be there in the first place. So they're actually doing our job for us. But it's very, very interesting that where individuals are identified, and there's a classic case, everybody, only last week, the gentleman in Dudley North, Conservative Party, who had the meeting with the EDL, that warranted 1.5 inches of column space in the Times newspaper. The individual that we expelled over the weekend warranted 2 full pages. Isn't it? Doesn't that send a message to you? We're getting the scrutiny. It's not good when we do identify individuals we don't like, but I can assure you, Nigel deals with it.
OK, yeah, gentleman up here.
To answer Farhad's question straight and better than Diana, it's probably because their policies are quite racist.
Rubbish. Rubbish.
Oh, yeah, sorry, who said rubbish?
Me.
Go on.
No, that's absolutely absurd. How can you claim UKIP's policies are racist? How can you claim that the millions of people that vote UKIP at elections are racist? That's quite frankly a disgusting opinion.
Well, mainly because their policies are they want to get rid of the racial discrimination law, which why would you want to get rid of that? Like, why would you not want to protect people from being racially discriminated? So,
I'll let Diane step in now.
Let's look back to when that race relations law went into legislation. It's nearly 50 years ago. A lot of what it had to deal with has now been dealt with. It's superseded what it needs to actually deal with. And it's quite right that we need to either look at that law and say, take out the sections that are no longer relevant, that are no longer appropriate to the situation we're now in, the society that we live in. And that's what Nigel was actually identifying when he said, and quite rightly so, British jobs for British people. And everybody, he wasn't the first person to say that. Gordon Brown said it. David Cameron said it. And I go back to the question of a few minutes ago. What's the difference? He was merely making a very, very good point. People here should have priority for jobs. I want to see all of you in the job.
OK, yeah, lady here, please.
I think it's quite easy for you to say that a lot of the problems in terms of the Race Relations Act aren't necessarily needed anymore as a white woman in a position of... my mother has had to work twice as hard as her white counterparts to get where she is in her career, and has always told me that I'm going to need to push a little harder, and I do see it. And I think that unless you are a person in that situation of oppression, it's very hard to understand it. And I mean, there's not a lot of diversity within your party, so how could you know that?
I'd love you to come to one of our conferences and you'll see exactly how diverse the party is. Now, the one area that I agree with you, because I've actually had the same. Yes, I have achieved a lot in my life and I'm very, very grateful, but I've worked hard for that because I'm a female in a man's world. And I can say to every young lady here, you come into the world of politics and if you think life's tough, my goodness, you'll find it even tougher in politics. But what I would say is you're here. I want to see you do well. I don't want to add to the burdens and the challenges that you face because you're competing for a job just because we've got open borders and all the young people currently in Europe could come here, or equally, you can't actually achieve what you want because you can't go elsewhere in the world for whatever reasons. And if you look at David Cameron's policy in terms of immigration at the moment, just think about what he said. He said, everybody in Europe, come here. But if you're going to come from India, from Australia, from New Zealand, from South Africa, you can't come here. You haven't got the same access rights. Now, I don't think that's fair, but I'm with you. I want to make sure you have the best opportunities and you can achieve your aspirations, and I think you can do that with UKIP as in government.
OK, I think we'll talk a bit more about immigration subsequently. Just take a comment from this gentleman here. So we want to talk about the sort of hateful attitude of some.
Do you believe the popularity of UKIP and the actual understanding of what UKIP stands for would definitely be in larger amounts if the media wasn't so biased? Like, for instance, UKIP the first 100 days, or any interview Nigel Farage has ever been in?
Do you know what? My first response to that is I would like to see a positive programme about UKIP. One of the ones you've just mentioned, the first 100 days of UKIP. Just think what that sent as a message. But have we had the first 100 days of Labour? Do we know what the first 100 days of any of the other parties would be when one already has identified £12 billion worth of welfare cuts? It's very, very interesting that that level of bias towards UKIP at the moment is very, very negative. So my view is I'd love to see a more balanced programming out there on TV, on radio, and in the press.
OK.
But we are where we are, and I can't get to any of the media people and suddenly say, change it. But you can.
Well, you've said it now. We get the idea. You feel hard done by. Tina, what are people saying online?
Let's get a contribution, first of all, from Chris in Kingsbury. Your members consistently show racist views. Why are you refusing to acknowledge this issue? How would you respond to...
I'm a bit flummoxed by that. Consistently show racist views. Give me an example. I have been here...
OK, we'll give you examples.
Yeah.
No, you asked a question.
Yeah,
so talk of Bongo Land, one of your representatives having problems with people with negroid features.
Right. The first individual that was mentioned isn't a UKIP member any longer. He was. He's not.
But people who are purporting or have
and that's
to represent your party.
And that's history. That's history. Roxanne Duncan, I believe, is the individual you're also now referring to. We expelled her from the party the minute she actually made those comments. I mean, what else can one do? You can't go through every application and literally keep saying to them, now declare, now declare, now declare. We do our level best. We actually prohibit anybody who's a member of the BNP joining UKIP. That's a starter that most of the other parties won't even make in terms of a joining point. I take the point, though, which is regretfully, the media does play up all of these racist angles, and I can only apologise and say I don't find it pleasant, I don't find it acceptable, but I can tell you neither does the hierarchy in UKIP, and we do our level best to stamp it out.
OK.
I just want to take a question from Alex, please. Where's Alex? Alex Garrido. Yes, what do you want to ask, Alex?
Do you feel uncomfortable listening to people speak foreign languages on trains?
No, I don't. I happen to be a linguist myself. I love hearing other languages. I've got no issue at all. Simple as that.
So how do you feel when your leader says stuff like that? When Nigel Farage says stuff like that?
That's his opinion. I'm not here...
But are you comfortable with that? He's a leader of your party.
I've got absolutely no view on what Nigel says in terms of travelling home on a train late at night and wishing that he could hear an English voice. That was a comment he made. It wouldn't have fazed me in the least.
But you have no view on him saying it?
No, none whatsoever.
OK. Gentleman here?
So I know you've withdrawn your candidacy for the election, but you're now part of a party and you have no view on what your leader does. Is that right?
I've got no view on Nigel sitting on a train and saying he's uncomfortable at not hearing an English voice. That was what I said, thank you. But, Nigel is his own man. He does, help us put together our policies. We know exactly where we stand in terms of policies. At the moment, we haven't got policies that dictate how we behave on trains going home. But,
so how am I supposed to vote for him if the people who stand in his party don't have a view on what he does or says, even if it's in a particular example? How am I supposed to vote for him? Even his supporters in that situation won't support him.
Yeah, and would you say the same to a supporter that didn't agree with something David Cameron said or Nick Clegg said?
Well, they're not. I would love to,
no,
but they're not sat right here, are they?
This is a debate, surely, between us. It's a discussion, and I'm saying Nigel's entitled to a view. He's entitled to make a statement. It happens that, it's been reported in the way it has. My view is, I was asked the question, I am totally comfortable sitting in a train, hearing other languages around me, and being in a train with people of all cultural backgrounds. Not an issue.
OK. Let's move on to another question now from Iqbal. Where's Iqbal? There you are, sorry, hiding over there. What do you want to ask?
Why is immigration such an apparent issue in towns where it's relatively low in comparison to the capital, which you don't see nearly the same number of complaints?
Mm-hmm. Immigration and controlling immigration and if you like, the response to immigration and the outcomes from immigration touch all of us. Now, it may not immediately seem like that, but every single person here this evening will want at a guess to drive a car, own a home, form a family unit, get ill, want to go to a hospital, see their GP. And if we don't do something to either control the demand for those aspects, or we just suddenly magic supply out of nowhere, it does touch absolutely everybody. The point I think you're making, which I fully accept, is that the impact of migration in certain parts of the country is not as great as it is in others. Now, here in the southeast, we live in a very crowded part of the United Kingdom comparatively. We've got huge demands on us to build enough homes. We've got problems supplying enough school places for young people. We've got issues about access to GPs and hospital services. Now, those can be dealt with, and they can be dealt with two ways. You either, as I say, suddenly, magically produce lots more of it and meet demand that way, or you look at it from another angle and say, wait a minute, let's slow it down. Let's control it for a while. Let's bring everything back into balance.
Okay, but I think what the gentleman is asking is why are the worries about immigration highest where immigration itself is lowest?
Well, I have campaigned in Eastleigh, in Margate, in Rochester, and all of those have got differing levels of concern in terms of migration. But I go back to the point that in every single instance, when migration came up, or immigration came up, It came about because somebody was making a statement about access to something. And they were the individuals that put this into context. And I really remember Eastleigh, where individuals were saying, I'm in a hospital waiting area, and I'm having to wait hour after hour after hour because there's lots of other people in front of me. And they aren't British, and they are, going back to an earlier question, they are speaking another language, and they didn't understand why, and they weren't comfortable with that, and they were asking, wait a minute, what's happening here? And I think that's the issue.
You see,
People are asking what's happening
I
here.
work for the NHS. I actually what kind of people that we have to treat. And yeah, there are immigrants and that, which do demand quite a lot of attention from us. But we've had these issues before we've opened up our gates. So it's not immigration, it's funding policies to the NHS which are creating those issues. Immigration, still, you haven't really answered my question. Why is it predominantly non-immigrant towns which have the highest complaints of immigrants are taking this away from us and that away from us?
Well, I can only go back to my comment. Please take me to the areas that you're citing or could cite as examples.
I work in Hackney.
Okay, I've given you 3 examples where what I've come across has been a slightly different scenario.
OK, you two have got a date in Hackney later. That's
we
good.
have.
Tina, what are people saying online?
A comment from Jocelyn, first of all. UKIP still wants to allow employers to discriminate between those from this country and those from another, which is racism. And then this one from February. Why do you refuse to acknowledge the huge economic benefit via taxation of immigration to the UK?
If every single migrant to this country paid tax, didn't have tax credits to supplement their income, didn't displace somebody else from a job, didn't leave thousands of young people with no prospect of getting a job because they've come in, I would agree with what that gentleman, I assume it's a gentleman, has said. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with nearly 700,000 young people still who are not in employment, education or training. And for a significant proportion of them, they will never, ever get a job. Because we've got into a stage where we've got low wage compression driven by vast numbers of unemployed young people coming here.
So where's the proof on that? You say that is the case. Where's the proof that, that's why young people don't have jobs because of these people coming over and taking their jobs in some cases, or pushing down wages?
I only take a moment to let everybody finish clapping. Let me give you an example that I've come across. I called into a Costa Coffee this evening. I don't know whether I'm allowed to give an advert, am I?
Other coffee chains are available, obviously.
And I was served by some Europeans. Absolutely fine. And yet, only a couple of days ago,
What an anecdote that is.
Only a couple of days ago, I was talking to 2 young people who didn't stand an earthly of getting a job.
So that's your proof.
I prefer. I would prefer those 2 young people to not be in a situation where they're having to go and claim benefits. I'd like to see them in that job.
OK, right.
OK, let's take a few comments from the audience, please. Yeah, lady here.
It seems that you actually don't know what you're doing. You're contradicting yourself. You're saying you're not a racist party, but at the same time you're saying you went into a coffee shop and saw a couple of Europeans. What are we supposed to take from that? As far as I'm concerned, we're a multicultural society, and that's how it should be. We're not going to vote for any party that doesn't consist of that, and you won't get my vote.
OK, yeah, gentleman here down the front, please.
I don't think that's what she said. I think she said there's 2 Eastern Europeans working in a coffee shop, and she preferred those jobs to go to British workers first. That's what she said.
OK, yeah, back to this lady. Yeah, go on.
Okay, at the end of the day, right, Nigel Farage recently said he wants to get rid of legislation in terms of discrimination. And he said he'd rather British employers employ people who are British over, for example, people who are from Poland. Surely it should be about that person's work ethic, not where they come from.
In terms of work ethic, do you know what I get fed up about? I get fed up with hearing complaints about our young people haven't got a work ethic. And that's the excuse used by an awful lot of employers to say, I'd rather employ a European young person than a British person. Now, I think that is more discriminatory to our young people than anything we've ever come out with. I do believe, and I do want to see, all of those thousands of young people who haven't yet got a job, may never get a job, and are being challenged for a job by people coming in from Europe where there's very high rates of unemployment. I want to see that situation sorted. And if there is an employer out there who says, actually, I want to employ that individual, but he or she can't because of the current laws and such, that is where we're going wrong.
OK. Yeah, gentleman here.
Hi, Diane. I want to take you back to a point you made a minute ago, which was that you can't screen everyone coming into your party.
Yep.
Roxanne Duncan had BBC cameras in her face, and she quite openly said that she wouldn't share a dinner table with someone who has negroid features. Now, I find it really hard to believe that she wouldn't have been more open about those views prior to those cameras being in that room. In fact... And in fact, the press officer that was also on the documentary even said something along the lines of, we've told her to keep her mouth shut. Now, I think it's unfortunate that since 2010, UKIP, their popularity has pretty much quadrupled. I think that's unfortunate. If you are to be taken seriously by the British public, what are you going to do to make sure that those racists, the sexism, the fraud, the homophobia, what are you going to do to make sure that you root that out of your party before they offend millions of people? Rather than waiting until they say something, how are you going to clinch the problem before?
With the best will in the world, the approach has got to be with the membership system in terms of declarations that people actually have to sign. And then
people aren't going to declare that they're racist, though, are they?
No, they're not going to. But if we can work the questions in such a way, then we can at least begin to attempt to root that out. I go back to that point that we are trying our level best. We are, in terms of this issue, for instance, of declaring whether somebody's been a member of the BNP, that is a starting point. We've obviously got a lot further to go along those lines. We're not going to be able to solve it overnight. I wish the other parties, in terms of their membership criteria, they were subjected to the same. Because, you know, why is it that individuals that have been members of other parties for years said exactly the same sort of issues, come up with the same sort of comments, and yet nobody said anything
We've been over that. Let's go.
Sorry, 2 seconds. It hasn't been overnight. The party's been going, Tina, since 1983.
93.
It hasn't been overnight. There's been racism, homophobia. These issues have been there for many, many years. You're never going to get rid of them.
Tina, let's go back to immigration a bit. People saying stuff online about it?
Yeah, a range of opinions coming in. In retrospect, wouldn't I, as a British citizen, want the opportunity to gain employment in an EU member state? The hashtag we're using is AskUKIP. This from Nathan. As a young person who's worked with foreigners, I can say foreign workers always have a better work ethic. And this one here from UK tenant. People who are born in this country should get a job before somebody who is born outside the country.
OK, let's go to a new question now. Where's Carl, please? Carl D'Souza? Yeah, what do you want to ask, Carl?
Nigel Farage has been supportive of legalising handguns in the UK. Legalising handguns in the UK.
Right.
Just in this year alone, I've seen 2 youths from my local area stabbed to death. As proved by events in the US, do you not think this is just going to worsen the problem?
Okay.
I'm going to reply in the context of my Justice and Home Affairs spokesperson capacity, if you don't mind. I've had a lot of contact from people who are seeking, you know, some form of agreement that carrying handguns and making them more freely available is a good thing. And in contrast, they're then saying, if you'll agree to that, UKIP or Diane James, you know, you've got my vote. My response is we've got very good handgun laws as they stand. They need to be in place. What I would not want to see is any relaxation of that because we've got a really security issue here in the United Kingdom. And why add to the problem by making handguns more freely available and, in fact, any form of weapon? So my response would be we keep the legislation we've got. If need be, we may even have to strengthen that legislation. But we certainly don't relax something and create more of a security threat and more of a potential threat to citizens on the streets.
So
that's just not the way to go.
This is another thing that you disagree with Nigel Farage on?
No, I just answered.
It's OK. That's fine. You're welcome to disagree with him. Yes, lady at the back, please.
It doesn't really seem like you have a big influence for your to your leader, Nigel Farage. It seems that you're just there as like a backbench MP, even though that's not your position. However, what do you think that UKIP will do for the ethnic minority teenagers in our society?
OK. Quick answer, please, Diane, so we've got to wrap this up.
Well, I'm sort of a bit bemused. I don't look at any form of segregation. Neither does the party. We treat everybody the same. I really don't understand where you're coming from.
OK, lady with the pink hair.
I don't necessarily believe that's a true statement when you've got groups like the EDL openly stating their political support for your party.
That is all we got time for from Diane James. Diane James from UKIP, thank you very much for joining us.